Well, thank you for coming. I'm Brent Cook, exploration geologist, economic geologist. I work with Joe Mazumdar at Exploration Insights. It's his letter, but he and I work together on it, and then I advise a few funds and such as well. Okay, so we've all heard and know from all up through this conference so far that gold's going up, silver's going to the moon, copper's going up, and critical metals are the thing to be in. And we also have heard that every one of those companies out there have the next great deposit. Well, quite honestly, we know that last statement's bullshit. This is a tough business to make an economic discovery in. So what I want to do today is actually go through the geology behind a particular type of deposit. These are the epithermal precious metal deposits. And I think the reason I'm doing this is in order to understand and interpret and make an investment decision, you need to kind of understand how these things form, the characteristics of them, so you can tell basically if it's making sense or not. So that's what we're doing. We're going to talk big picture, plate tectonics, then we'll go into the subduction zone, how the magma crystallizes, what rises to the surface, look at some hot spring systems, go more detail into high-grade bonanza systems, what they look like at surface, because most of the time we're looking at these things blind, either through cover or we're right at the top of the system. And then we're going to look at some considerations in terms of what economics need to be behind a vein, what you got to consider. All right, big picture. Here we've got a spreading center. Basically consider this the Pacific Ocean. As the magma from the earth rises, comes to the surface, and it just moves outward as more comes. And that migrates to the east and west, subducting beneath the Andes all the way to Alaska, basically the Cordilleran, as well as subducting along the western Pacific from New Zealand all the way up to Kamchatka. What this picture shows is, again, here's the spreading center. The magma is moving, the ocean floor is moving in both directions. It comes to the continental plates. When it gets there, it subducts. When it subducts, it melts, the magma. And from that magma, we differentiate off the metals. And that's a picture of all the, not all, but most of the metal deposits are associated with that. These are where the epithermal deposits are, copper deposits are, that sort of thing, around the Pacific. And here's the same thing through the Tethyan, Carpathian belt of rocks. This is showing copper deposits, but porphyry copper, but gold and silver are there as well. Runs all the way from Romania to Mongolia. So this is where these things occur. All right, if you're looking for an epithermal deposit in the Canadian Shield, I suggest it's unlikely. All right, so now we're going to focus. As the magma rises, it forms a body down here and vents to the surface. Right in this zone here is where all the fun happens. That's where the magma differentiates. That's where the mineralization comes to surface or is deposited. So we're going to focus on that part of the earth right now. And what I've shown here is as the magma chamber begins to cool, certain minerals crystallize out. And as they crystallize out, they kind of fall to the bottom. And what's left at the top of the chamber, up here, is basically what I call the scum. It's like a soup where the stuff just rises, the grease and such rises to the surface. That scum is all the minerals or elements that were not precipitated out in the granite or the andesite, etc. That's where the iron, remaining iron, a lot of silica, water, gold, silver, copper, lead, zinc, those things don't really incorporate into minerals that are in the granite. That's a picture of a granite, a fine-grained porphyry. and a rhyolite. So that's how these things separate out. So what we're looking at is the very top of this magma chamber where the scum is, and that's got to rise to the surface. And this is what it looks like at the surface. Faults and fractures and such carry these fluids to the surface. The top picture there, that's Yellowstone. The bottom one, that's exclusive to Exploration Insights subscribers. And these fluids are carrying gold, silver, arsenic, antimony, mercury, etc. to the surface. And what determines where they precipitate out is basically pressure and temperature dynamics. Under a certain temperature and pressure, these things crystallize. And that's sort of where we're going to go next, is what it looks like around where these things are crystallizing or depositing. Now we've got a cross-section through one of these systems. Here we've got, that's the fault, the feeder. At the surface, low temperature alteration. This is where the hot springs are, clays, very low temperature, steam generated alteration of the rocks that are there. Move down here, get into the water table, we start precipitating out opal, very low temperature silicas, and we start to pick up some chemistry in terms of mercury and such. Dropping down into here, distal clay alteration. From the center of these things, the water circulates like this. As it does so, it alters the rock that's in it. It'll change a hard gray andesite into a white clay or a green clay. So we know the system's active. So if you're at surface looking for these things and you're walking through a section like this, you'll know you're getting closer or farther from the system. As we go deeper, this central area, that gets silicified. A little higher temperature, so you've got silica as you get closer to the vein generally. And these are all generalities because each system's different and these are in very active tectonic zones. But generally, this is what we're looking for. And then down here, that's where the vein is. That's where the mineral precipitates out. In this next slide I'm going to show you, we'll talk about the minerals or the metals that are in that zone. All right, same kind of cross-section. I stole this from Caleb's website at Headwater. Low temperature up top, we've got mercury. In here, you're doing soil sampling. You're not really looking for gold. You're looking for indicator elements like mercury, antimony, that sort of thing. Central zone, this is where the stockworks are because as the pressure decreases, the vein comes up and tends to go like this. So that's where these stockwork zones are that people look for and actually can mine if they're at surface and such. Moving down into here, this is where we really want to be, the bonanza zone. That's where the high grade precipitates out. And if you keep going deeper in these systems, you start picking up more lead and zinc and less gold. And then when you get down towards the bottom, you actually start getting some copper in the system. So if we're taking surface samples and your company is getting more copper than mercury, you can pretty well guess they're too deep in the system. It's gone. It's been washed away, eroded away. And this is what they look like underground. This is one of the most famous ones, Hishikari in Japan. I was there a couple times. Fantastic deposit. 8 million ounces at better than 20 grams gold. That's the vein. There's a fellow standing right there. This is what it looks like in detail. Each one of these little bands represents some sort of pressure temperature change up in the system that dropped out the minerals we're looking for. And you can see here, see this there? That's a vein, a banded vein that's been broken off and then reincorporated into the vein. So multiple things are happening here. This is a very active, dynamic system. These are core samples from the Fruta del Norte deposit in Ecuador. Fantastic deposit. About 10 million ounces at 9 grams. gold and, 113 grams silver. Beautiful deposit. Completely blind discovery. What these veins, or the core pictures of veins show, is on this one, there's your coliform banding. There's the banding. Each one of those bands represents some sort of dynamic pressure release or temperature change that precipitates out the mineral. Here, a really good example of, there's your veins from up here, but they've been broken by another pulse. And the best systems have a number of pulses coming through, bringing in more and more gold. So it erupts, it breaks up the banding, carries it up, and then then it silicifies, kind of seals itself, the pressure builds up, and bam again. I hope I'm making some sense. I'm trying. All right, so these things form near the surface. And they're usually in very tectonically active areas, high mountains and that sort of thing. So they tend to get eroded fairly quickly. And as this chart here shows, 65% of the epithermal deposits are 20 million years or less old. So it's very rare to get a deposit that's much older than that, unless there's a specific situation where the earth sort of rifted apart and more material came in and filled it. And that happened in North Queensland in Australia. You can see that in Patagonia, where there was a rifting event and material came in later on top of these epithermal high level deposits. So again, for the most part, stick to young areas, geologically young. At least, what is the Earth? How old is the Earth? 6,000 years? Yeah. Thanks, Caleb. All right, let's talk about important features of these systems. They're generally not exposed. If we're looking for brand new grassroots discoveries, that's what we want. You know, it gets old and tiring when people keep drilling the same holes and calling it a different name and repeating previous work, verifying previous work. I always figure, if the previous work was wrong, why not drill where they didn't get anything and hope they were wrong? Anyway, this is a picture of North Midas, again, another one of Headwaters projects. And here you can see, this is the opal center, right at surface. We don't expect much gold in there, a little bit of mercury, maybe some antimony, but we know the system's active right there. And beneath that is the geophysics. And what it's telling us is that beneath the surface, there's some silicification. And remember, we go back to that slide I had, where silicification is where you're getting close to the vein system. And that's what that blue and such shows, is there's silica, probably silica down below that, an alteration. And that break between the two is being interpreted as the feeder system that brought these minerals and did the alteration up. So that's the target. And we want to hit that at the right depth. All right, so we've got a vein. As a good friend of mine says, ore makes money, waste loses money. A mine is a terrible thing to waste. So this is a picture, a schematic, if you will, of a vein. It's about 1.5 meters wide. It grades 10 grams a ton. What you need to know is, yeah, but what's it going to grade when it gets to the mill? And so to mine this thing, let's assume they've got to mine 3 meters. And the extra 1.5 meters grades 0. So what you've done is taken 1.5 meters of 10 grams across the vein, mined it at 3 meters, and you've dropped your grade from 10 grams to 5 grams, just like that. So this is really important to keep in mind when you're looking at drill results. What's the actual mine width going to be, and how are they going to mine it? All right, now these are some very rough cost estimates that I think are, just you can use looking at a vein system. And, take a picture of it, because I haven't, this is the first time I've shown this. And what we're looking for is The steeper the vein, the more you've got gravity working on your side. And that helps a lot. That saves a lot of work. Even better, if you can come in from the bottom and mine up, you don't have to use all the fuel hauling rock up. That costs more money. So ideally, you want a steep vein that you can go in down here and mine on the way up. A shallow dip, once you get past about 60 degrees, gravity doesn't work anymore. So you've got an extra effort pulling that ore down. That's an extra cost. So what I've got here is if you got about a less than 2.5 meter vein, if it's steep, your mine costs are going to be $35 to $85 a ton. If it's shallow, that's going to be real tough. That's real tough unless it's extremely high grade. So you're totaled with G&A, et cetera, about $78 to $128 a ton for a steep one. For a shallow, again, it's going to be hard to make money on that. This is extremely high grade. You can see the next one, 2.5 to 5 meters, $18 to $35 to mine it. All in, you're looking at in the order of 48 to 65 for a steep versus double that, 70 to about 106 for a shallow vein. And again, these are just generalities, but it's important to keep that in mind when you're looking at someone's drill holes out there. Is it steep? Is it angled? And then continuity as well. A lot of times within these things, you've got internal waste that's hard to see. And that sort of thing can really screw up a mine. I think the best example would be Rubicon. A lot of internal waste they didn't see, and they went broke. Cutoff grade. Ballpark, what I like to use for a cutoff grade is what the total cost, mining cost and milling cost is going to be, which if you're looking at, call it a 5 meter wide vein, your cutoff grade is going to be a gold equivalent, recovered, between $33 and $45 a ton. I want to see my average grade double that because I've got to pay for the CapEx and make a profit. So ideally, your average grade should be at least double the cutoff grade, assuming the cutoff grade is what you break even at, all in mining costs. Okay, summarizing. What we try and do at Exploration Insights is find something that's good enough, find a company that's good enough with a deposit good enough that we don't have to build it. We want someone who knows how to build it to buy it. You want to be in relatively young terrain for these epithermal systems unless there's a reason it's been buried. High-level indications, important. Keep an eye on that so you know where you are in the system. If you're looking at high copper, lead, zinc values, you're probably too low. It's been washed away. You want to see multiple events. It's a dynamic system. It's been busted up, blown up, deposited, broken. That's a good thing to see. High grades over mineable widths. And what I've thrown in here is silver equivalent because I saw a lot of silver excitement around here today and yesterday. And you want to look at something in the order of plus 200 grams and ideally 400 grams over a mineable width. Minimum mining widths, you get below 1.5 meters, it gets really tough. You're going to have dilution issues. For instance, like I gave the example, 1 meter at 300 grams silver over a 3 meter width, it's 100 grams you're sending to the mill. Angle of the angle of the vein, don't forget, that's important. Mining with internal dilution also. And if you don't want to do all that, subscribe to Joe's letter. He's good. And that's into my presentation. We're going to have these fellows up next. And after each one, there's going to be time for questions. So keep that in mind. So thank you. Appreciate you sitting through this.